Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Graham Detmers, as Jackie-san said, and I'm the metadata analyst at Hathi Trust Digital Library. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm really, quite honestly, thrilled to be here. The title of my presentation is Japanese Language Materials and Hathi Trust, Past, Present, and Future. I'll start with the past, a brief overview of who we are and what we have. Hathi Trust, founded in 2008, is a not-for-profit collaborative of academic and research libraries preserving millions of digitized items that as of this year has grown to represent 210 member libraries serving over 300 campuses, including one of our newest members, the first from Japan, Keio University. Some major points about those millions of items. The scans are primarily digitized from print. All of our records originate from the catalogs of those contributing member libraries. At this point, no individual selection has occurred, and consequently, gaps exist. We currently hold 17+ million digitized volumes representing 455 languages, with just over 50% of the digitized volumes being in English. More importantly for today, our Japanese language collection has around 550,000 individual volumes spread out over 240,000 titles. Of those, approximately 78,000 volumes have been determined by copyright analysis to be opened up as full view, at least within the US, with publishing dates spanning from 1392 up to 2015, a span of almost 700 years. The whole collection of mass digitization and local digitization of print collections has been contributed to Hathi Trust by what has grown during our history to amount to over 60 research libraries. And within that, all of those Japanese language volumes were contributed by about 30 of those institutions, so around half of all our contributing institutions. Now to talk about our present. I'm going to use a single search to illustrate the major discoverability issues we're consequently confronting today because of how that history unfolded. To start, I'm going to use Genji Monogatari in Japanese. Because of its long publication history, cultural importance, and worldwide fame, I'm expecting a broad range of works related to that title. I can see from the results that there are 693 total items, and of that, 30 are full view to any user in the US. But that's just an exact search for the title in kanji. What about a standard translation of the title? Here there's only 51 results for an exact basic search for Tale of Genji. And if I romanize the title, I get 735 titles. Interestingly, that number is less than the combined translated and original Japanese results. This highlights a problem for Hathi Trust. Our origins ensure that we're now oriented toward a primarily North American, English-speaking and reading audience of researchers. You can see further examples of this when you compare the origins of the Japanese results and of the Romanized results, as you'll notice some fluctuations. Keio has more results using the Japanese title than it does for the Romanized title, but still the Romanized hits aren't zero, while almost all of the other contributors went up. And also more locations contributed records that hit for the Romanized search than the Japanese, 12 to 11. But notice that even the fact that Keio Daigaku is translated in this location facet indicates the primary audience of this collection. I won't be touching on our full text search beyond this slide because I'm not familiar enough to speak about it with authority. But when I run the same two exact searches on just the full text, we get about 100,000 hits for the Japanese and about 15,000 for the romanization, corresponding to volumes where the terms are found in the OCR text. Now let's look a little closer at some of the results under the original Japanese search by starting with a record from Keio. Even looking at a single result tells us a whole lot about the Hathi Trust catalog. Because they're big and blocky, the first thing that catches the eye are the geta, which result from an older cataloging practice. The romanization, though, isn't uniformly using geta, giving us a hint as to what is missing, which helps us identify another discoverability issue. Tai is one of the readings for the second kanji in Iwaki Jintaro Cho's name. It's just not the correct reading, so their name is effectively misspelled. On this slide is the record for the same item in Keio's online catalog. None of that romanization work is there and probably wasn't ever really in their own catalog. My suspicion is that its origin has to do with manual work that had to be done during the Google Books process to send the metadata to Google and to us. Now, the only reason I'm focusing on Keio's records in this manner is because I know that we're going to be getting an entire new refresh of their catalog records soon. This is a whole catalog refresh because they switched from Aleph to Alma, which they contacted us about. But we always wanted updated records, even in circumstances not as dramatic as a change in LSP. Ideally, our records will match the records in the originating institution, though of course the reality is much different. Which brings me to an important point about Hathi Trust. We do not make any metadata corrections ourselves at this time. We consider that the canonical record lies with and is the responsibility of the originating institution, and we will only contact them about an updated record if an error is reported or discovered. Now I want to examine discoverability, audience, and the cascading issues it creates from a different angle. So here's a result from the same search, but faceting for the University of Michigan as the contributor. You can see when the audience is North American researchers, romanization is the norm, and the Japanese is in the Mark 880 reference to the 245, instead of vice versa, as was the case with the KO record. But like with the KO record, there's an issue for discovery, even when faceting for the same university. It's a subtle one, however. It's this, though it's not as easy to identify the issue, if you can call it that, in this single record. The presence or absence of that B matters in Hathi Trust for faceting, for both Japanese and Romanized spellings. But this seeming inconsistency doesn't necessarily fall on Michigan, even though that's what's faceted. As an aside, this is also true for the inclusion of name ender kanji, like Sama or the Cho on Iwaki Juntaro's name earlier. As you can see, there are some records in this faceting with the Romanized author name without the B, the 88 results at the top, but you can't see that there is also a smaller set that contain a B that holds scanned items by Michigan. But in that instance, it's a single title record with multiple volumes, and the selected title level record is from a different university than Michigan. That title happens to be Tanizaki Junichiro's infamous 1939 adaptation of Genji Monogatari. The Tanizaki Genji record illustrates another issue unique to Hathi Trust, which I noted at a few slides ago. Hathi Trust places values on duplicate scans of titles, so you will frequently see a single title record containing scans contributed by 2 or more of our member institutions. And in Hathi Trust, the metadata for records with more than one volume attached are not combined. One record is algorithmically selected over all the other submitted records, as preferred by evaluating metadata field presence. That explains the presence of the B here in our faceted results, seemingly inconsistent for Michigan. This record is actually based on California's record, San Diego specifically, but you can only tell that from the mark. So only from peeling back more and more layers in the catalog, approaching the core of Hathi Trust. I hope I've shown how underneath this simple search lies the accumulated history of international cataloging, of the North American Academic Library, of mass digitization, and of course, Hathi Trust Digital Library. I hope I've also shown how, as Hathi Trust expands its international membership, we're going to have to grapple with our history as it regards our positionality. Basically, stated plainly, I've tried to show that this is where Hathi Trust is right now. But that's not what it's always going to be. Now to talk more about Hathi Trust Future with Japanese language materials. You'll notice that up until now, I've said very little, nothing in fact, about the Emergency Temporary Access Service, or ETAS. Undoubtedly, it played a major role in my being here today, so I'll talk about it now. What I want to say about it is that it was an intervention and disruption in our normal understanding of how we serve our community. With many more visitors than we had experienced before, and especially with users looking at previously unavailable items, we heard a lot about what else members and users wanted and places where we could do better. But these disruptions, interventions, and engagements are part of the program's great success, as all Hathi Trust successes, past, present, and future, are communally held. So I want to begin to conclude by underscoring that ETAS was an ending for Hathi Trust that has also become our beginning, and that what we've learned from that understanding of our success is already shaping our future projects and plans. I already mentioned that we're soon going to receive improved records from KO, which should address many of the issues you may already be familiar with, even those I haven't talked about. Beyond that, I can only say a little bit about our future plans, and then not in more concrete terms as such, hence ambiguous in the title for this last section. But what I can say, I say from the perspective of Hathi Trust metadata analysts, like that I have plans related to the value catalogers have found in that temporary access to digitized materials, as well as plans on improving or simplifying dramatically the workflow for record updates from contributors and much more. We're currently a core staff of 14 at Hathi Trust, and we each have our own plans for how together to grow our own areas from here. Lastly, how can the East Asian library community get involved and keep open a conversation with each other and with us at Hathi Trust? All our internal governance and user support is comprised of volunteers from our member institutions. If you're so inclined, please volunteer when nominations open. Regardless of membership status, please report errors, but also submit any suggestions for improvement or titles you'd like to see. We can't guarantee anything or a timeline, but we can't add a feature or a title or do any webinars or other events if we don't know someone wants them. Honestly, we like everyone's engagement. As I said previously, we're working on making updated record submission a much smoother process. But if you're a contributing member institution and have done cleanup work in your catalog, please make sure we receive those records too. We're happy to work with you to make that happen more frequently. You don't have to be a member to sign up for our newsletter to see what we're doing. You can join our membership community on Slack if that's your thing. And finally, if you're a member institution, become a contributing member by scanning and depositing your Japanese language content. Our collection only grows through the efforts of everyone. So thank you for inviting me here today. I look forward to your questions. And if you're so inclined, I'd love to have further conversations and more questions beyond today. So please feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you.